every single day.
People want to connect with someone who...
Self-expression is life.
It is the challenge. It's a challenge of life. You can't get mad at other people for not seeing your vision.
It was all about a grind. Like I said, I was selling CDs, DVDs, and clothes out the trunk of my
Whatever
car.
it takes.
This is for the people. Don't forget that. What's up, fam? Episode 28. I'm here with Amy Kaufman, executive producer. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So I think the reason I really wanted to have you on is because everyone, since the pandemic and even before the pandemic, they get excited to go home and binge, right? Whether it's a TV show that they're hooked on or it's a movie that they're really excited about, people aren't going out to the movies anymore. The cinematic experience is coming to them. So thank you so much for coming on. And I guess if you don't mind just starting off like who you are, some of the shows and movies you've worked on, and how you got to where you are.
Sure. That's a big, long question. So, I've produced both film and television. I started off in independent film in New York, which at the time was, every single project was a struggle to put together. You never knew what was next. And at a certain point, and quite accidentally, I transitioned to television just as television was really starting to transform. We'd had The Sopranos and a few other things, but we were still very much in the model of standard network episodic television. I had just finished a film with Todd Haynes about Bob Dylan,
Wow.
which was a big, challenging film shot in Montreal. We did 4 or 5 different geographic and historic periods all around the area of Montreal. And I was kind of recovering from that when I got a call about producing the pilot for Gossip Girl. And I thought I was vaguely familiar with the books. It wasn't my era. It wasn't stuff I'd read, but I knew of them. And it sounded like, oh, this would be a really good antidote to what I'd just done. And they wanted to approach it like an indie film. So that's why they somehow sought me out and found me. I met with everybody via telephone, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, and we clicked and off we went. We did the pilot. We had a fantastic time and kind of knew, like we all sensed that this was going to be something big. And, then I ended up doing all 6 seasons with them. And I still get a lot of excitement from people when they discover that I worked on Gossip Girl. It timed out really well for my son, who is 26, because it was like we were shooting in the neighborhood of his school and his friends were fans. So it just, was a lot of good street cred there. But what was notable about the time is just how television was changing at that period. There were some factual events that helped that, such as things like tax credits, which made it feasible to come to New York City or New York State and shoot these shows, which was very appealing to the audience. And we started to break out of that classic format of, we're going to do 22 episodes a season, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of things changed at that moment. It was a very good time to be, inadvertently transitioning into television. Since then, I've done shows like Billions, House of Cards. I did limited series like When They See Us for Netflix. I did Invasion for Apple, and I just finished another show for Apple that will be out this year called Lady in the Lake.
Lady in the Lake. Make sure you watch it on Apple TV. So obviously Gossip Girl was huge for you, and that was, it sounds like your defining moment in your career of just like blowing up. But like, how do you get to that point, right? Because I know you went to school for...
I did not go to school for film and television. At the point that I was in college, it really wasn't deemed necessary to go to film school. In fact, there were very few film schools at the time, and many people just felt you go and seek the practical experience, and you learn on the job, or you come from a family where people have been working in film, whether it's on the crew side or the executive side. But I would say the majority of people did not go to film school at that point in time. And I've never regretted that, although it would be lovely to sit and indulge just the pleasure of watching and talking about films and all of the film history and understanding, who was who and who influenced whom and how European and American films, diverged. But I was always interested in film. I'm going to have to go way back at this point in time, but I was came from a household where film was beloved. My parents loved watching movies. They were always going off to see interesting films at our local kind of indie film theater. And but I never perceived it as something that one could actually make a career out of. When I was in high school, we had an assignment. Everyone had the assignment. You had to do a year-end senior project for your health class. And somehow or another, myself and 3 friends decided we would make a short film about psychological defense mechanisms. Oh. You can see that would be a super appealing idea. But we wrote these really funny scripts, and we acted in it, wrote it, directed it. So we just did the whole thing ourselves on Super 8. And one of our gang had a Super 8 camera and editing gear, and we put it all together. And it was quite charming, and the teacher was just like blown away. So it was a super satisfying experience that really stayed with me. Eventually, years later, I met up with some people, and what I'm getting at is that there have to be these inspiring moments, these moments that make you feel like, I just want to do this. This is so, it's fun, it's meaningful. I feel like I am expressing myself, and I've had a few of those in my early days. I met some people who were working on a film about Roger Baldwin, who's the founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. Okay. And he was being awarded the Medal of Freedom that year, so they were making a film about him. And John Avildsen, who directed Rocky, was actually directing the film.
Wow.
So I just was working in a voluntary capacity, but I got to meet Roger Baldwin and to talk with him, and we would go out there on Sundays and visit with him, and he's about 95 years old at the time, but just an amazing individual. And it really meant a lot to me, and really imbued the notion that you can tell an important story about important things through the medium of film. So at that point, I was pretty hooked. I'll keep going a little bit. So in those days, there wasn't internet. I don't want to date myself entirely, but, it wasn't like you could go online. Right. There was a yellow book directory, and I literally took that and went door to door and knocked on doors with my resume to get a job. And one day I knocked on the door of Maisel Brother Films, and for those who are not familiar, these are they were, very significant documentarians of our time, films like Gimme Shelter and Great Gardens, all the Christo films, etc. Plus, they were a hub for the documentary film world in New York City. And lo and behold, David Maisels opened the door when I knocked.
Wow.
And he just, I don't know, he liked me, and we talked. He said, okay, we're going to hire you. We're going to train you to be an assistant editor. Which in those days meant you had to learn how to sync dailies, because now when everything's digital, but then you had a separate strand of sound and a separate strand of film, and you had to marry them together, and there was a technique to doing so which you just had to master and then get very fast at. So the way that you sync dailies that's what the slate is about. When the slate slaps, that gives you a visual and audio image that you then can line those up, and then the rest of the reel will be sunk up.
You're saying set, and then they go like that?
That's right.
Oh,
That's right.
I always wonder that.
But because they were documentary filmmakers, they didn't like to use a slate because they felt it would disturb the natural environment. So they never did slates. So you had to rely on another technique, which is anytime something said a B or a P, it would function the way that a slate would function. So you'd have to like go in search of a B or a P. Unfortunately, the film I was handed was all in French because it was from the from the Christo films, and it was a dinner party with about 20 people, and most of the time the camera was on somebody's back, so you never could see and hear simultaneously. It took me about 8 hours to sync my first roll of film, and I thought, well, that was a nice day in the film business. I thought I was never going to be asked back. But they were completely chill about it and really wonderful. And through that, I kind of spread out to other people in the documentary side of things, and eventually reached the point where I really knew I wanted to do narrative films, and so had to orchestrate that transition, which was tricky as well, but it eventually happened. And then I think the final piece of it is that I ended up doing a film in Canada called 32 Short Films about Glenn Gould, which was a tiny little, very esoteric film, or so we thought. But it ended up doing very well and garnering a lot of honors there, and just finding an audience. So that really helped springboard my name, my reputation somewhat. So I was able to, based on that experience, really develop more so as a producer.
So looking back, right, you feel like the step that really started to make your career go was you going door to door.
Yes, I do think so. I mean, I think really what that is you just have to be willing to be very persistent and really put yourself out there. And this probably gets to the connection between what I do and being an entrepreneur, because you have to, whether you are super conscious of it or not, you have to have some crazy level of belief in yourself or confidence that you're going to go out there and succeed in that fashion. But the other part of it is you have to also know about yourself that a conventional job is just never going to work.
Yeah.
And I think those two things together, like I just never could imagine myself in a more conventional situation. I think my parents were keen on me becoming a lawyer. I tried to be a paralegal for a short time after college. I just hated it. And I think I just knew that I was not meant to work in that kind of conventional environment. So I'm guessing that is something that also feeds the entrepreneurial
for sure
psyche as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's standing out to me is not only the vulnerability that you're talking about, but just being willing to fail. You probably went to how many doors where they just slammed in your face. And nowadays, I have people reaching out to me all the time, especially since I sold my business, where they're like, whatever you do next, I want to be a part of. And I'm sure you can relate to that, because after you did Gossip Girl, 95 episodes, which was how many years?
6 years.
6 years of your life. Now all of a sudden people are probably popping up that you've...
It was more than that. We beat 100 episodes.
Oh, really?
100 episodes is a huge thing in the world of
television,
network television. Yeah. And I remember there's a big party for us. I think it was closer to 100.
Well, IMDb's got to update it. You can't trust it. So, when you think about the world now and everyone wants instant gratification, right? Like, we're going to take this long conversation format and we're going to cut it into clips and use it for Instagram and stuff like that. What kind of learning lesson can you teach people who want to get into the production industry about persistence, about failure and change and vulnerability? Because now I see in your face, it's like exciting, right? Like that's your stripes, explaining how you just randomly bumped into this huge producer and he gave you, you got a shot. But what do you feel like was the real learning lesson in this experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I talk to, people do come to me, people who are starting out, and whether they're the children of friends or someone, you're like, can so-and-so talk to you? Can so-and-so, and I say yes as often as I can, because I really do like to help and encourage young people. The starting points these days are in some ways a little easier than when I was starting. For one thing, there's so much more volume of work happening, and New York itself is like super busy, whereas in those days it was slim pickings. So I usually encourage people to, first of all, I will share names with them if I can. Like write a note to so and so. I'll if I can think of 5 people that they should reach out to, and then hopefully those 5 people will give them more, so it can help. But you can also, with the tools of being online, etc., you have, it's just easier to source where it is you might find work. There are also things like HR exists. There's more specific methods of getting a job than there were in those days. I don't think that many people go door to door, have to go door to door anymore. More people do go to film school. I think that's a much more traveled path. And some people come into the industry knowing that they want to pursue a particular lane. Like, I want to be a writer. I want to be a production designer. I want to be a DP. And that's a little easier because you can focus their search in that way. But I think it's a really great thing because film it's not only collaborative, but it's made up of many different departments. Every film production has an art department, a costume department, electric department. There's so many departments. I think you will ultimately be better at your job if you really understand how those departments function. So wherever you start, to hope to be in a position where you could observe that and learn that. I think you have to always maintain a very positive attitude. A lot of time people are just going to judge you on your attitude. If you're someone they enjoy having around and feel like a good part of the mix, you're working very long hours, and so the set vibe is important. There is a social aspect to it. And even if you're doing something like a lockup on a street corner in the middle of the night on a cold, wintry night,
putting the cones on the cars,
which is like the worst. Finding ways to communicate and learn from the more experienced people around you, and you still need to be, super persistent, and you need to be very focused and really understand and learn as much as you can about the really technical nature of making film and television. So I think starting in the trenches is the way to go. Really, I feel like I don't know much about television and movie production, but this is almost relatable to how I feel, because, how many people nowadays would be willing to take a shot and do a free internship, and I mean, I've worked for free for many years of my life just because I wanted to be closer to someone who I consider to be successful. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, and I think everyone's seen Haddad movie trailers all around New York City, and you see how long it takes. My first place I lived in New York City was the East Village, and then I moved to the Upper West Side. 2 huge locations for shooting TV and movies, and you see how long it takes. I still remember the Coen brothers shooting, I can't remember which movie it was, but in the East Village, and it was like 2 days to set up to shoot like a couple hours. So talking about the duration of, if we're talking about 100+ Gossip Girl episodes, how does that translate into how many hours it takes? Well, Gossip Girl was still based on the studio formula of 8 days of shooting per episode. So the episodes would be in the realm of 45 minutes. We would shoot for 8 days, which is
God.
It's actually fast,
really?
Like when you compare, well, for example, a film that's 120 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes.
Months, yeah.
We'll shoot for, let's say, 12 weeks, and a television show where, if you're doing the show I did more recently, which was 7 episodes, 7 hours worth of material, we shot for 106 days, but that's still only about 15 or so days an episode.
Oh, gotcha.
And Gossip Girl was half that.
Wow.
Because at the time, you worked within these formula constraints. So you had sets that had been built that were standing sets on your stages. You'd always spend about half an episode there. You'd really have to do about 6 pages of material a day, which is very, very fast. That's changed a lot now that we have premium television and now that we have, A-list talent in the world of television, including directors who are featured directors and who are, they're not only not used to being able to work like that, but the quality, the production quality of what our television significantly, shows are very elaborate. They're shot all over the world. They have elaborate visual effects. So there's not a set formula anymore. Everybody has to kind of design each show in its own, to its own requirements. But in the world of premium television, I'd say between 15 to 20 days an episode has come to be
The norm.
not unusual.
Wow.
So,
That's pretty insane. So 15 to 20 days to make about an hour. It's amazing. And to think about how many people it takes, right? It's like a small army to produce a show. How does that work in terms of I can see the hierarchy involved, but how much would you say involves a leader like yourself leading from behind in the trenches to not only show them what you're going to produce and what the result's going to be, but also the trust aspect, right? There's a lot, especially in entrepreneurship. It's for instance, Roger, he came on as basically an admin, right? Selling the fact that we're going to start producing podcasts. Now he's helping out with our sales team. So there's a lot of trust that goes into something like that. Is that translatable to how you feel?
very much so. When you're working in an industry where essentially everybody is freelance, so what you have is your reputation, what you have is word of mouth, the people you just worked with, what will they say to the next team if someone calls them for, people call me for references. All of the time. So ideally, you formulate a team, like this is the person who's going to be my production manager. This is my AD. This is my accountant. This is my whatever. But there's certain positions you can't lock in that way because
they might be on something else.
They're on something else, or the director or one of the other producers has an opinion. So it's always going to be an amalgamation, but it's going to be based upon either people you've worked with before and you know their work, or doing a very thorough search via, some positions people have agents, so you'll do like a big agency call and you'll get everyone from CAA, WME, I say to send you all their candidates for DP, and you'll have to go through this big candidate search and winnow it down. And in the course of that, you'll vet all of these candidates. What do you know about them? Like this DP, are they fast? Are they slow? Do they like to use a lot of, you'll ask a whole bunch of questions trying to ascertain what that person is like to work with. Because most of the time, people are, you meet them for one time, they're,
right.
It's easy to be charming, so you can't entirely judge things on a first interview, and you're not going to have an opportunity to do, it's not like you can spend a month with this person and then decide. So you really do have to build a reputation and protect that reputation. And when you know something's gone well, you say, look, I'd love in the future if I need a reference for so-and-so to call you, and people will most of the time say, sure. So that's how you hopefully lay the groundwork for a very solid team, so that you put all these key positions in place, your heads of department, and you hope that they're going to run their department, that you don't have to be in the nitty-gritty of each and every department. You have to oversee these departments. You have to have conversations with the heads of departments on a very regular basis just to ensure that things are going well. Is there a surprise? Is there anything we should expect? You have to have really good communication with those teams so that if something is going awry, they come to you, they trust you, they feel safe telling you about it. Because you can't possibly manage each and every individual. So that's a big piece of it. It's like the beginning of a project. The casting the crew is like casting the cast. You're trying to put together a really amazing team from the get-go, and then hoping that will
spark.
Be this.
Wow, I didn't even think about how much the human aspect is important and just managing it. So it's very similar to running a business. Like, you have a very finite amount of time. You have your department heads that you have to constantly have an effective line of communication, and then really you're empowering them to manage their employees. Something that we talked about before going on camera is just how exhausting it is, right? Because you're just giving it 100%, and then when you're done, you're taking a little breather, but then you get itchy again to start get it going again. So what does that feel like for people that love consistency? This is probably not the right.
It's not a great choice.
Right.
I mean, I will say that it's been, the last 10 years have been just nonstop, or maybe even more than the last 10 years. People are just working constantly to the point that it's a problem. Like, you can't crew up necessarily.
Right.
You're searching for people.
Yeah.
And I just did a project that was in Baltimore, and finding enough people was a constant challenge, because you have your core crew, but then on any given day, because you're doing a much bigger thing or you're doing a specialty thing, whatever it is, you need a whole bunch of additional personnel, and you have to find those people. And Baltimore is a town with some infrastructure for production, but not huge. So you're likely then having to bring people from New York. So there's a travel factor. Then another show came to town in Baltimore. Wow. So we had competition, and we started losing some of our people to that show. And some of these other production hubs, like this happens in Atlanta, some other places, a new show will come in and people will want to hop to that because that's going to take them, 4 months into the future, and your job is just ending, or something along those lines. So people are always looking for the next best opportunities. So that's unusual, and that's what's happened with the proliferation of volume in the premium streaming cable world. There's so many shows that every single production hub is super busy. People are super busy. It's hard to find people, which means it's also an opportunity for those who are starting out, because they'll get trained more quickly, and very possibly they'll get elevated more quickly, which can be great for them.
It can be stressful.
It can be challenging. It could sometimes lead to a bad result because people get elevated before they really have the proper experience. So, these are all the sort of kinds of things that happen when you have that much demand.
And you're the leader, right? So you have to stay calm, cool, and collected, even if things aren't going smooth, right? So what happens? What happens if you don't have enough people? Because that's something that we struggle with, right? Amazon, the beginning of the pandemic, they decided if everyone's going to buy everything on Amazon, we need to have many people than we do. So what happened? They stole all of our employees. They paid better benefits. They gave, in the beginning of the pandemic, they were giving a $5,000 bonus, one-time sign-on bonus. So when things like this happen, right, especially in my industry, we can't put as many trucks on the road. The day is much more congested, and customers can feel it. So in a production situation, what does that look like in terms of when you don't have enough people?
Well, in some cases, you just have to make do. You just have to this is what we have. We're just going to have to make it work. Yeah. And, production people, crew, are very can-do in their mentality. So there's always a way to figure things out. And that is another piece of this, which is that is how people think of people in production. They're just going to figure it out,
Right.
no matter what the thing is. And so more and more you will be thrown like crazy circumstances to figure out, and it'll be really hard. It'll be really stressful. People will get upset, but ultimately you'll probably pull off whatever the thing was so that you've just laid the groundwork for yet another level of, challenge to come your way. I don't feel like I've ever gotten to the place where we were so depleted of personnel resources that we couldn't accomplish what we needed to accomplish. I've had this situation occur, this happened in Baltimore, where you, for example, want, 300 extras for a scene. You think you've booked 300 extras, but on the day, only 200 extras actually show up.
Yep.
And you just have to make it work. And sometimes in a situation like that, which has to do with a visual element on camera, you can think about utilizing visual effects in post-production. You can create crowd through visual effects. So
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, but you can't do that for crew, kind of like lights,
Right,
or furniture or something like that.
So that's when you call up your son, have him come to Baltimore and hold the light up. Some of these projects that you're working on, the budget is probably insane. So you're basically trying to figure out in the beginning how much it will cost. But obviously things change. As we talked about, personnel changes. It might take, weeks longer or months longer. What does that look like in terms of like, you set a budget and then you have to like back into it and things are constantly changing? What does that feel like?
That's a really good question. Again, I go back to the early days where there were these formulas that made it a lot easier to kind of stick to a plan. And people who worked in television were television people, like directors were television directors, and everyone knew that and were much more comfortable knowing how to work within that. But in the land of premium television, where you're pulling a lot of people from the feature world, or you're just trying to achieve much more ambitious goals creatively, it is much harder to stick to that. So yes, you draw up a plan in the beginning, you budget that, you do everything you can to try to stick to that, and it's very hard to do so. And another element of the last few years has also been COVID. You
Right.
can't predict what will happen. We had multiple shutdowns on our show.
There's no way not to.
So now there's separate COVID budgets that are outside your main budget, and it's sort of like what you can't control. But it happens for other reasons. I've been on shows where the writing team will change midway, and the new writing team will come in, and they'll rewrite a whole bunch of material, and suddenly you're dealing with very different scripts that have very different requirements. That will change things. Or you'll have a cast shift in the middle of a show. Like on my last show, we had a significant cast shift, right as we began, and that heavily impacted our production schedule and all sorts of other things. So there's a bunch of things that happen that are just outside your control, that you have to expect. You can't think about it this way: like you build a company and you have years where you're building and growing that company till it gets to a level of being capable of a certain quality of performance.
Of course.
With most films and television shows, you are putting this company together kind of overnight and expecting it to function at peak performance pretty well instantaneously. And of course, the individuals are experienced and have worked a lot, but there's just this expectation that it's going to all come together and be smooth and operate, according to plan, and it almost never really works out that way.
Of course.
Or things happen in your location and a location falls apart, or all sorts of things can happen. So it's a bit expected that things will be not exactly as planned, and it's just a matter of degree. It's never fun having conversations about budget overages. Even when you're working for a company like Apple and you're not exactly worried that they're going to go broke as a result of, your overage. I mean, in the early days of indie film, it was a serious problem. If you went over, there was literally no more money.
Yeah.
You'd have to stop and try to find that money or chop something else out in order to, you really didn't have the resources. Whereas now, most of these entities are so well-to-do and, they're quite willing to spend money in certain places. They just don't like to spend money in other places. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it creates quite the same crisis mentality when that is happening, but it's still something you don't want to have happen. And it means that someone in my position is always kind of walking the line between the creative and the production side to try to keep both on the same path. And when you can see that things are changing enough, or you can anticipate that, you have to just have the conversations as soon as you possibly can. Go to the studio, go to whomever, say, I think this is happening. Is this something you're going to want to improve? If not, we're going to have to talk to the writer or the director about other changes that will offset, so it will happen. And it's very much the job of someone in my position to shine a light on it and figure out what those solutions are to get to a place that
probably as soon as possible, right?
As soon as possible.
So you have to basically foreshadow the near future and try to. Are you ever in a situation where you come under budget?
I've come under budget many times.
And how does the studio they must love that, right?
They do love it. There's two things. First of all, that's usually assessed at the end of production, and there's always going to be post-production. So they're very happy to have some cushion going into post-production because editorial schedules can go longer. You may need more visual effects than you thought. You may want to do reshoots, etc. So they're very happy if they have some production pennies to help with post-production. The other thing is that nobody really wants you to come too under because that means that you haven't put the money on the screen. It's a really bad thing to have pressured people to make cuts or give up on certain things or shrink their appetites for certain things, and then you come way under budget and they're like, wow, I could have had this, or I could have shot this for 2 more days and I could have made the end product better. You don't want that to happen either. You want to spend wisely, and if there's some crumbs left at the end, that's great, but you don't want to feel like you shortchanged the creative goals of the project.
It's like when you're a leader and something goes great, you give all the props to your team, right? But when you're over budget, it's your fault, right? So
it can be. Yes.
So it seems like you've worked with every single major player in the game: Netflix, HBO, network television. How does that look in terms of, because sometimes they come to you, right? But other times you might have to pitch it to them.
Most of the time, the way I work is most of the time things come to me.
Okay.
And they come, I have an agent, and they, generally speaking, come through my agent. It's what's interesting working for all these different entities is they all have a different kind of corporate culture and corporate persona, and you learn how they differ from one another and what you like in one place that is done differently in another place. So it's really, because you're moving around so much, it's important to really know that about these entities. It's good to work with it. And you're also working, the show will be for Apple, but usually there's a studio. So you want to know, what is that studio like? How do they handle things? You want to be, your studio is your partner, and you want to feel like they are going to help you and to some degree protect you, because it reaches a point where you need the studio to issue an edict on whatever the thing is, because your voice alone will not be sufficient.
Yep.
So you need to be able to go to the studio and say, this is the circumstance. It's up to you. You need to say what you want to have happen here because I've done what I can. And maybe you want this. And maybe I should not be pushing so hard. And maybe I should be saying, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go to the studio and ask for it. So,
That's incredible.
You know, I don't want to go too into how I feel about
Of course.
different entities, but
Right.
they all have their individual
Pros and cons.
yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, everything in my mind just relates back to, entrepreneurship. But one thing that I'm hearing is like knowing when it's time to, represent the film or the show versus like what can you let slide, right? So things happen every single day, it sounds like. There's no way for it not to happen. Right. And a lot of times it's probably out of your control. But how you react to it, how your emotions play a part in it is really what it sounds like is the most important part of this. Is that relatable?
Yeah, no, very, very relatable. Things happen definitely every day. There are things, unexpected things, or, your director will come in the morning with like, I have a new idea for how I want to handle this. And, you have to remain open. You can't jump to a conclusion or jump to a reaction. Even, sometimes I caution myself on this is sometimes in my mind, I immediately know.
Yep.
Oh, if we do that, it's going to create this. It's going to do the A, B, C, whatever. Like I'll know that. Like my mind will just work that way instantaneously. But if I just blurt that out in the moment, then that person's going to feel very shut down.
Of course.
They're going to feel like you're not listening, you're not hearing, you're not supporting. So you have to kind of take it all in, process, explore, see if there's a solution. You have to work the issue. Right. You can't just jump to a conclusion.
It's amazing. One thing that stands out to me is, you're working with these A-list celebrities, actors and actresses. Like, what do you feel like, not only for the people who want to pursue acting, but like for the other side of it, like what do you feel like you've learned over these years in terms of how you handle, because if all of a sudden you're working with Brad Pitt, I'm sure he doesn't want you to treat him like Brad Pitt. He wants you to treat him like a human being, right? So like, what have you learned over the years with dealing with people that if they walk on the street, hundreds of people will come up and start taking pictures of them?
Often it's the bigger stars who most want to just be treated like a normal human being.
Because they probably never have it, right?
They don't have it, and it's not an enjoyable place to live in the realm
Right.
of just the product of celebrity. Like that's just not a happy place to be. And sometimes it's the less successful or the striving who
Are the divas.
get a little more, that I've seen that happen. I think it's good to approach everyone like a normal human being. I think the difference with the big stars is the mechanism for dealing with their issues is usually not with them directly, but through their people, their
Right.
agents.
They're not going to tell you.
etc. And that's kind of a good construct because you can protect the relationships and the face-to-face relationship, and then work whatever the issue is behind the scenes. And so I actually appreciate that, and have generally had good relationships with the agents and the managers. Or then there's a situation like Gossip Girl where that cast, they blew up overnight.
It's pretty amazing to think
It's
about.
crazy.
Yeah.
And they were all very, very young at the time. So it was especially, they weren't even grown-ups, so it was especially like, how did we, they were just zinging all over the place. That was actually quite challenging because, most 18-year-olds, their behavior is already suspect.
I'm scared.
Yeah. But add all of that in where everybody wants a piece of you and everyone's inviting you here and there and sending you stuff and all of that. Things can get unruly pretty fast, but you also don't want to be the school mom,
Right.
like I did not want to be that person. But you have to also, sometimes we'd have good, like they'd show up 2 hours late. And, sorry, that's unacceptable. We have crew here. They're standing by. They have
Getting paid.
families to get home to at night as well. And that is just not a right thing to do to those people. I would try to devise like ways to exact a punishment that didn't feel like a punishment.
Yeah.
Like, okay, today you're getting an ice cream truck for the crew, or today, like ways that would, it would cost them something.
Yep.
It would make the point, but it would ultimately build some community and connection between
That's a great idea.
everyone. So
Yeah, and I'm thinking about what you said with your son, that luckily it blew up before he was where he's old enough, right? I think this is the ongoing struggle of a business owner, of an entrepreneur, is like balancing work life. And it sounds like when you're dedicated to a show, you're giving 100%. So like, what have you learned along the way in terms of creating a atmosphere with your family where like they can understand, but they also feel like you're part, you know what I mean? You're there on the day-to-day basis.
it's hard to create that balance. And I'd say at some points I've been better at it than other points. I mean, there were times when my son was pretty young where I was doing a film out of town and I travel on the weekends, and I still look back at that time and have some regret about it. He didn't seem to be suffering any severe long-term emotional effects of it, but I look back and feel like, maybe that wasn't the best decision. I see every version of it. I see people who are like, I will not shoot outside of town. I will, and other people are like, I'm going to be gone for 6 months and it'll be very hard for me to travel. And I just won't see I just worked with a DP from Australia who barely saw his family the whole entire time. Also, our lead actress who's like, I can be away from my family no more than 2 weeks at a time. So everybody has to decide what works for them based on, how they know their family functions and what their family needs and are capable of putting up with. My husband would travel to me, or, if it was possible when my son was little, they would come and be with me if that were.
That's awesome.
So we worked through it. I don't feel like there's a perfect solution. I feel like it's very hard to keep those balances. I would say some positions make it even harder because you literally have to be on set from the moment of call to the moment of wrap, so you just don't have an option, whereas I can probably peel away, or I have I have a little more room to maneuver. It's a hard part of the business, and I don't think there's one answer for everybody. So
it's great. I think about how important marketing is for our business, and everyone says they have the best customer service. Everyone says, they can do same day availability or whatever the case is. How important do you think marketing the TV show or the movie is in terms of the success?
It can be critical. I mean, absolutely critical. It's not something I'm not particularly hands-on in regarding the marketing. I'll usually be part of some early marketing meetings where the initial ideas are being tossed around, and sometimes there's an element of it that you need to accomplish while shooting, whether it's like behind the scenes videos or photo shoots or whatever. It's super critical, and I could think of some projects I've done that I thought were wonderful that kind of died because of bad marketing.
Or the other way, right? Where you're in a situation where you're like, this is okay, but the marketing was so, and you're like thinking about another project where you're like, I loved this. I cannot believe this didn't become huge. So I was just curious. And then in terms of social media, like, does that play a huge part on who you choose based upon how active they are on Instagram? Or
I mean, there are people these days who have huge followings who will end up cast in something just because of those huge followings. I don't think it's the type of work I do. It's not like the main driver of anything. Most studios, while you're shooting, like to keep all social media very, very controlled. They don't.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be very specific about what you can do and say on social.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like SNL now. Some of these people you've never even heard of, but they have such a huge social media following.
Yes, that's a different sort of thing because they're comics and they come from a different background, etc. Yeah.
So we went through a lot in a very short amount of time, but like it seems to me like one of the most beautiful parts of what you do is that you're not necessarily on camera, but you're like the leader from behind. Is that a great way to say it in terms of being
definitely a way to say it? Yeah, sure.
What would you say is like the most fulfilling part of being an executive producer?
When everything comes together, when the not only the end product is great, but the experience of how you got there was great, that the team gelled and everything worked and you created something that really brought an audience together and conveyed an important message and in the course of doing so.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you've seen like a movie or TV show so many times. Do you watch it when it airs?
Usually by the time it airs, I have watched a lot of cuts and
like
don't always do that.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I'll go back to it like literally years later and say, I wonder what this feels. I'm going to take a look at this and see what it's like now.
It's so cool. It's like you get to watch all of your hard work and create this final product, and it's so great that you can go back and look at your legacy years later and see how it makes you feel knowing how much hard work went into it. If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say and why?
We've just talked about how I am the behind the scenes person. So the notion of a billboard is...
Well, it doesn't have to say your name or anything.
It doesn't have to say my name, nor would it have my photograph. I just think I would want it to say, be kind and be fair. I think just remind people that even though we're working in these super intense industries, you don't have to lose sight of how you treat people, no matter where they are in the hierarchy of things.
That's great. That's a good learning lesson for any single career, or not even just a career, like just by going through life, right? It's like people are born into certain situations, but like that doesn't define who you are. And I feel like that's very relatable. Listening to you talk is like, you started off just going door to door and like you never lost sight of that. And it's pretty amazing to hear that. I can't even imagine how many people have reached out to you over the years, and like as many people as you can give advice to you have. And I think that's probably why you've been so successful. You never lost sight of that. Do you have any questions for me?
What gave you the idea? You've gone from your original business model to doing a podcast. How did that come about?
Well, just so everyone knows, we are sitting in Remix Market in, I would say, what is this, like the small collectibles area. And so thank you so much for coming along on City. So what made me start from Junk Luggers to starting a podcast? I think that ultimately my biggest fear has always been leaving a legacy. I feel like every entrepreneur we talk to, that's like their big concern is like, how will you be remembered way beyond your years? And I think that was a lot of motivation, not only for myself, but for my brother and for our family. We just did this huge convention in Las Vegas. There was 200 franchisees there. So it's like, sometimes I was sitting there and I'd just be like, how did this happen? Like, who am I? Like, how did I get here? I think for podcasting, Roger and I, really the vision's always been is like, everyone always comes up to me like, man, I wish I could be an entrepreneur. I wish I could be like you and work whenever I feel like it and, you know, be the boss. But like you and I both know, it's not like that, right? Like I'm working crazy hours. I'm working super early in the morning, late at night. 10 years, it was like we were a joke. Like we were the Jewish kids that started a junk removal company. Like how bizarre is that? So I think for me, it's always been like, I wanted like, when you come on to this podcast, it's like people really see all the different dynamics and the personalities and like what you have to be thinking about. So like executive producer sounds so glamorous, right? But like the more we talk, the more I can hear the emotions, right? Like you didn't just learn something, you experienced it hundreds of times to be able to speak confidently on it. And even then, like, you know, I asked you your favorite part about working with Netflix or Apple, and it's like, you still know that like you have to tread lightly. So I think that's the idea of the podcast is like you see on Instagram a 30-second clip on Amy and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I want to do that. But then when you get into this long format, you get to really see how much work goes into something. So that really was the motivation behind the podcast, is like show the grind, show how much heart has to go into it. And, you know, now being on the other end where I've sold it, it's like, it really wasn't an overnight success. It was half my life. So I really wanted to show what the overnight success really looks like. And in your situation, it's been decades. Right. Reach out to you where it's not asking about advice on movies or television. What would you recommend? What's the best platform?
Probably LinkedIn, and I don't check it very often, so don't get offended.
I sent her a LinkedIn message, and it took a couple months, but that's great. Yeah. So reach out to her on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you. We're still trying to figure out our new podcast name, so bear with us here. But that wraps up episode 28 with Amy Kaufman, and thank you so much.
Thank you.